Do you ever get that feeling that you're making the same mistake over and over? Maybe a little bit different times in your life, different people that you make the mistake with. But ultimately, you've hit midlife and you're looking back and you're like, what is it about the fact that I can't seem to learn my lesson around this thing? Well, guess what, my friends? This is a real phenomenon. And it goes back to a little bit of what we talked about last week. When you're trying to be safe, you do get stuck. And if you want to get unstuck, you'll want to keep listening today.
You're listening to Straight from the Psychologist's Mouth, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice-divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I've taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started.
Welcome back, everybody. It is the final in this series, the final podcast in this series. So if you've been listening, you have heard that we have talked about how to thrive in midlife. And that's really what this whole series has been about. We're trying to help you show up to midlife in a way that helps you thrive and get into that centered life that you want instead of a midlife crisis, right? That we'd like to avoid that at all costs. Kind of really the theme behind my podcast in general is if I can get this information out to you in a different format, maybe I won't have to meet with you across the couch for how many hours of therapy to help you navigate these things, because I sure would like to help women preventatively figure out kind of here's where the vulnerabilities are going to be going into midlife. Here's what I think you should be doing to kind of prevent that from happening and even pivot into like the strongest, best part of your life. Because I really do believe that is what midlife can be. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. I still encourage you, though, to go to the notes for today's podcast or any of the podcasts prior to this that have been part of this series. Click on the link to get your free half-hour one-on-one coaching session with me, because we will individually go through all of these areas that I've talked about over the last several weeks, and we will help you have an individualized plan. So not just the general recommendations that I'm making here on the podcast, all of which are great and all of which I strongly suggest you employ. I also want you to be coming to me and getting that individual look at your life, like really kind of looking at in these areas. So what are these areas? We've talked about navigating midlife in a way, showing up to your midlife in a way that helps you to thrive in relationships, with hustle culture, with your finances and how that creates stress, and some underlying feelings of just not feeling good enough. And with your major health issues, right? So these are all significant things that if you went on the Googler, you would find are the main things that women are struggling with at this stage in their life. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is one of the things that I think kind of is the umbrella over the whole thing. And that is that women in midlife often feel like they get stuck in cycles of doing things, making the same mistakes, running up against the same problems over and over again. This is the kind of stuff that we are seeing ourselves do, the people pleasing, the not feeling good enough, the overemphasizing serving others over balancing that with the self-care and having that distance between you and me, that ability to love you and love me simultaneously, not having that kind of boundary. These are the kinds of things that really get in the way for women. But what's kind of overarching that entire thing is that we have never been acculturated, taught, and certainly aren't given the kinds of supports around the idea of personal development, around the idea of personal growth, or just doing our own work. Okay. So I think in therapy, that's kind of how we talk about it a little bit more is do your work. If you do the work of understanding why you tick the way that you do, why you do what you do when you do it, all of a sudden you're navigating life at a whole different level with a whole different level of self-awareness. And of course, I'm going to harp on again that I'm not just looking to help you build self-awareness. I want you to build compassionate self-awareness, right? I want you to really see yourself and be able to say, okay, I get it. I get why I've been participating in my own suffering that way. It's okay. Like, I'm not mad at myself. I'm not going to get out the whip. The mean girl doesn't get to have a say in this. I am going to show up to this differently because I'd like to change it moving forward. I would like to get out of my own way and do my work so that I can move forward. So one of the common things that you'll start to see for women in midlife is that they all start doing, some variation of looking at things they're regretting. And either they're going to get stuck in that, double down, and keep doing the same thing. That's that rut or stuckness that I'm referring to. Or they're going to go for that personal growth. Now, some of us feel thrown into this, like a major loss, a major change, a divorce, a career shift, or kids aging. Some significant change may kind of push us in that direction faster than we expected to be, having to do something like that. In general, though, what I am looking to help women to do is to really just name this and step into it and want it for themselves. That's what I'm looking for, ladies. I want you to want to do the personal growth, to want to design a life that you want to be living in. And in order to do this, you need to be staying on top of your own work. You have to look at some of those places we don't like to look at, those stuck places where we're participating over and over again in the same things, the same mistakes that aren't working out for us. And I know you know that these are there. So as always, let me tell you a story. Let me put this let me put this into a picture for you. And boy, do I have the picture for you. So it was about 5 years ago now, and I was in a 6-year marriage at the time. I think we had been together for a little over 7 years. And I knew that there was some financial troubles that were happening. I mean, that was not news to me. And while my ex was out of town for a couple of weeks, there was a knock on the door. And the knock on the door ended up being two individuals that came into my house to tell me that my house was in the foreclosure sheriff sale process. And even though I knew that there was something of this nature that possibly was coming down the pike, I had no idea that it was like in the imminent future. For those of us that have had the unfortunate experience of going through something like this, usually these things take a great deal of time, right? And so you're not like surprised somebody knocks on your door. However, for me, that is exactly what happened. It was a knock on the door that rocked my world. And essentially, after that was the dissolution of that relationship, was, a whole financial upheaval and a starting over for me. Not great stuff, right? And I have to tell you that one of the things that occurred to me, it did occur to me, but also became glaringly obvious from the people that, well, honestly, people on both sides, people who were supportive of me and my kids, and people who were like, how did you get here? You know how you got here. I had people on both sides of that were telling me, like, essentially, either you were totally blind to this and totally lied to, or, you knew about it and you just didn't want to know about it. And I knew in my gut that it was the latter. I knew in my gut that I knew most parts of what was happening, but I had invested in not knowing. what was happening too. This is a pattern that I have, pattern that I learned from growing up in an alcoholic family. Okay. So there are these two things, I call them the gruesome twosome. There are these two things that happen when you live in a chronically stressful situation, like living at home with an alcoholic when you're a kid. And that is elusiveness. So being elusive and illusion, right? And so elusive, to be elusive is to create your illusion, and illusion is what you believe to be true. And these are actually survival mechanisms. So you talk about this stuff, and people are, like I said, they fell in two camps. They either were on my side with it, or they really were quite judgmental towards me. And I towards myself in the beginning, like Natalie, how could you do this again? Like, how did you get yourself stuck in not realizing this was happening to this extent yet again? There's a lot of acculturated judgment around using this survival skill. And yet we all do it. To some extent, we all do it. And it's natural. It's a natural part of our survival mode. Our brain can only take so much at one time, and it will need to distance itself emotionally or shut certain facts out that are not in our conscious awareness in order for us to get along. Now, this makes a ton of sense when something major happens. I just had a death in the family recently. And certainly I saw levels of this because it's quite natural, actually, after a major loss like that, especially an unexpected loss like this was for my family, that you kind of are doing the daily stuff, right, as a way to kind of have blinders on to the significant amount of negative emotion that's just kind of right under the surface for you, right? That's a normal way for the body and the mind to show up to a major significant change, loss, some sort of trauma that it's experiencing. And listen, people, trauma, and I'll talk about this in another podcast at some time, but trauma itself is not indicative of having to have a trauma disorder. So there's a lot in pop culture, there's a lot of overlap I see that is just not accurate clinically. Yes, indeed, every single one of us on this earth will go through a trauma or two or three or four or five or six in our lifetime. Will all of us develop trauma-based disorders? No, we won't. Some of us are resourced in a way that will go through the stages of grief and pivot through and not have that long-term problem of, knowing that I have this loss and trying to push it away. Over time, we're able to, bring the gap between thinking about it and not thinking about it closer together. We're able to process through it. We're able to feel the feels when they come and let them go. But some of us didn't get those resources. And if we did not get those resources, then what we do is a natural biological response. And that is to bring in our skills of elusiveness, or what we call clinically dissociation. So essentially what the brain is doing is it's separating itself. It's blocking off certain memories so they're not in your, like, right in front of you, you're not thinking about them, so that you can go about your day. So you can put one foot in front of the other and spoon up some cereal and put it in your mouth when you're going through a really difficult time. So that's that elusiveness that your body mind is doing subconsciously or unconsciously without your awareness. It's just going to do this because this is what it knows how to do to stay safe. And if you actually look up the definition of being elusive, one of the top definitions, like an Oxford dictionary, is it's an act to actually protect yourself from a danger or protect yourself from a perceived threat. You're just like, I got to be elusive. I got to get around this. I can't have the danger right in front of me. So I'm going to kind of avoid it and go around it. Right now, what happens if you do that day in and day out and day in and day out is the truth or the belief that you have about things gets a little eluded. So the illusion then is not completely accurate. It's usually based in truth. It has lots of facts that go into its truth. But for sure, you guys, it's not the truth. And so when I had this experience for myself, I'll be damned that I had done a ton of work. I mean, I'm a therapist, and so I've talked about that on this podcast. I go to therapy. Like that's just I recommend it to any therapist that I do supervision and consultation for. I have been in therapy and in and out of therapy my entire adult life, and certainly my entire career as a psychologist. It's just good practice. But I had not touched yet on whatever was happening in my life in that particular marriage. And because of that, I had not done the work to not get myself into that pickle of having somebody knock on the door and really, for the life of me, not have known it was to that level, that it was going to be happening this quickly, and that the levels of things that I was not aware of had gotten to the level that it did. And part of that is that my protective factor, the illusion that I create when things feel threatening, is to tell myself, well, it won't be that bad. Or if it's not that it won't be that bad, it's that I'll be able to manage it. I'll be able to handle it. And these are two themes in my life that have come up over and over and over again. Now, on the surface of it, when I say that, it's kind of a resiliency factor. I don't want to totally throw that out, right? Like it is actually useful for me to believe, hey, it can get better, like helpfulness, right? And that I'm, helpfulness, right? That I have some ability to make that change. So having these two beliefs, great. But having that illusion sometimes clouds then me seeing things that fall outside those truths. And that was really what had happened during the course of my marriage. Just little by little, it was never an overnight thing, but just things eroded over time to the point where I was just going to work every day and taking care of the family and doing all of my things. I knew there was some stuff over here that was a problem, but also believed that it was getting taken care of by my spouse. And so I didn't have a reason to question it, although I did. And so there was some intuitive things that would happen, but my elusiveness was to push that intuition away because it was scary for me, and to stay in that comfort zone of the not knowing, because ignorance felt blissful, I guess, in that regard. So this gruesome twosome, elusiveness and illusion, otherwise clinically known as dissociating, is pretty common around things that feel like a perceived threat. And I don't mean that that threat has to feel like it's life or death, although it may be. But it's a perceived threat of some kind. And these two tend to be at the source. Anything that I've helped the women that I've worked with in coaching really start to pick apart and see how it is that they've buried certain information and are repeating a same problem over and over. So like in any of my online courses or in any of my coaching packages, I have early in the process talk about this idea of self-awareness with a compassionate lens, because I know that this in particular, digging this thing apart, is a really hard thing to look at. So remember in my story, like people were really judgy. I lost friends. I lost, whole bunches of relationships where people just were like, listen, Natalie, you have a doctorate. Actually, just to make this story, to add insult to injury during this time in my life, I was going through mediation because we have a kid together. And it was a mediator of all things that came to me and was like, well, you have a doctorate. You have a doctorate. It's a very untrauma informed mediator. How is it possible that you didn't know this, this, and this, and this? Like I had to give her a little lesson like I'm giving you guys today, because apparently this had never occurred to her. And I'm hoping that it influenced her practice to the positive, because the way that she treated me, not trauma informed, certainly not kind in any way. But people really had a hard time thinking, Natalie's a really smart person. So there's just no way that this totally went without being seen. There must have been some participation. But that's where the judgment comes in, is that there's this idea that that participation is volitional. It is not. So the elusiveness that we create, or that behavior that we create, is a survival mechanism. It is subconscious or unconscious. This is not something that you're doing willfully. This is something that you're doing by biology. And that, my friends, is why having a compassionate lens, first of all, understanding those things, and education is a big part of what I do with coaching too, but understanding doesn't scratch the surface if you don't have this compassionate lens to be able to look at how I've participated in my own suffering, how I got myself in this mess, but still be kind to me, still be understanding towards myself, still understand that I'm only human, and still really give myself the gift of staying curious about it instead of judgy about it, of wondering, how did that happen yet again? You were in your mid 40s by then, my girl, early 40s. You were in your early 40s by then, my girl. Like, how is it possible that you had missed this piece? You've gone through a lot of therapy. Like, how is it possible that you didn't figure out that this was going to be a thing here? And staying curious is really the action of staying compassionately self-aware, because it's a non-judgmental way to stay self-aware. And that all of those things are things that I teach early on in any of my coaching packages or online programs for that reason. So, like, what does all this have to do with midlife? Well, what happens, I think, and what I have had the experience of with the many people that I've helped, is that it's this gruesome twosome of creating an illusion, kind of living that life, and the action of elusiveness that gets in the way of our moving in our personal growth and moving towards, being the person that we really want, designing the life that we really want to live. And if we're not compassionately self-aware and don't have the self-empowerment tools and the ability to care for ourselves right, we're not going to get in a growth mindset that allows us to stay in that curiosity continually, and it'll get in the way. So one of the things that comes up commonly is around kids aging out, like aging out of your homes. Like, there's an entire life that you create around being that role of the parent, parenting a young American child, teen American child, and then all of a sudden they're not right here in front of you. And if you need more information about my suggestions on how to handle that transition from transactional parent doing and meeting needs to a relational parent, building that underlying relationship with your adult children, go back to that golden, what is it? Mastering relationships in the second half of your life. And I think that might've been one of the first ones I did in this series. So go back and listen to that to get more particulars, but this is a common place where this comes up. What happens is, for self-protection reasons, we can't see that we've been self-sacrificing doing things for ourselves, because there literally wasn't enough time in the day to do that and parent, right? So women often choose kids over themselves. It's something they've been acculturated to do. There's religious values to this. There's family values to this. And over time, that elusiveness has created the illusion that their kids are their life. What rocks their world then when they hit midlife is, once those kiddos are out the door and that relationship has changed significantly, it bursts the bubble of that illusion. And the gruesome twosome is no longer going to work, my friends, because you can't just be elusive to it and work around it. You're going to have to start to face, there isn't a way to be the person I was. And so you have to start to find new ways to grow, personal growth, personal development, or find things in life that have meaning for you, or that you align with a purpose that you want to be doing, right? You can take the superpowers you've created being a parent and apply it in so many different ways. So it's not like anything was lost, but it definitely has to change. And what rocks people is that they kind of created that illusion. They put up some blinders and didn't see that they were self-neglecting their own personal development for as long as they did. And so we start helping you with these two particular things, the elusiveness and the illusions that creates. We are helping you to bring compassionate self-awareness to that, to highlight, well, that makes a lot of sense you did that. There's only 24 hours in a day. and you were slotted with 80% of the rearing in the situation that you're describing, or 40% of the rearing plus working a job in the situation you're describing. So of course, this is not like your young adult life where you had all this extra free time. This was like pedal to the metal. So it makes a lot of sense, but it also makes a lot of sense that your body and mind didn't want you to know you were self-neglecting, right? It didn't want you to see that you were pushing that stuff away and pretending it wasn't happening. So now what we have to do is build a new self-care skill that stays on top of that. We need to build some compassionate self-awareness that doesn't let you get too far down the pike in your self-neglect where you find yourself in a pickle. Because what can happen is if you don't deal with that underlying thing, you will shift all of that stuff that you used to do with the kids, self-neglecting, not feeling appreciated, not feeling heard and seen, because kids are the worst. Let me just be honest. Like, they are not here to give you accolades for parenting well. If you parent well, they probably never will say a dang thing. They just become the humans that you would like to see in the world. So it's not going to be reinforcing in that way. And oftentimes what gets paired up is just feeling like you've done all this self-neglect, you've sacrificed for them, not a lot of appreciation. If you don't get out of that pedal to the metal, put the blinders on, don't see the self-neglect and apply it to a new job, apply it to a new community service that you're doing it, apply it to your relationship with your spouse or your partner after your kids go out. None of that will serve you. None of that will serve you. You will be doubling down into the same problem again, right? It feels safe though. If you listen to last week's podcast, I talked about when we feel safe, oftentimes means we're going to be stuck, right? For reaching for safety, we are not necessarily reaching for growth because growth feels uncomfortable. And when the kids move out, we will want to grow. We will want to grow into an adult and into a life that we want to be living. We do not want to be stuck. But if we get down into the safety pieces or the comfort pieces of, I know how to do this way, then it's hard for us to extricate that. And this gruesome twosome definitely comes up over and over again in that way. So the antidote is pretty obvious, right? The antidote is personal growth, doing your work, right? There's a million different ways that you can do this, my friends. And truth be told, women kind of on a, developmentally, women tend to developmentally edge towards this regardless, without crisis. Don't necessarily need crisis, but some of us need a bigger shove to go this way. But many of us, what you'll see is that women in midlife are kind of looking for more purpose-driven careers, are switching things up like that. I can't tell you, going on this entrepreneurial journey of learn to love your story. I've, been in a million different business coaching opportunities, some of them free, some of them paid for. And the number of women in my age group in these things, it's phenomenal, but it is consistent with this kind of like, it's a natural development that we want to grow. We do. We want to better ourselves, be more in alignment with a purpose, and adjust. But what will get in the way of this is that gruesome twosome, is the stuff you don't know that you do in that automatic unconscious way. And if you're not unearthing that, then the personal growth and development becomes really hard. That's what's really unique about the Learn to Love Your Story program that's different than other life coaching. I do give you a fair amount of just life coaching tips, period. But what I am really trying to provide for you is the underpinning skill sets that let you continue to do this on your own. I want you to build the machine of personal growth that helps you keep on growing, not necessarily having to come back and see a person like myself and get that coaching. You might from time to time, just for a little adjustment, but I want you to have the understanding of how the whole thing works under the surface. Because if that is the stuff that you build, then it won't matter what you're growing into, what your personal development is developing into, what your growth goals are. You have the skill sets underlying that help you rinse, repeat, and rinse, repeat, and rinse, repeat, and keep on doing that. So my programs really are focused on that journey for you. I don't want you just to find, your next purpose. I want you to find the skills that help you find a purpose when you feel purposeless. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm providing for you. That's what, if you want to click on the free 30-minute one-on-one coaching session, what we're going to do together. We're going to assess kind of where are your vulnerabilities and strengths. And I'm going to give you some really great individualized ideas for how you can start growing in this way. But the antidote really to this issue of the gruesome twosome kind of undermining personal growth and doing your work, and during this life transition, when you have to grow, finding the means to be able to do so is all about learning those underlying personal growth and growth mindset skills. And there's all sorts of pieces that go to that you've heard me talk about on and off throughout this series. There's, making empowered decisions for yourself. There's compassionate self-awareness. There is having the extraordinary belief that self-care is this thing of, I want to stay in my life, not I want to escape from the stress of my life. That self-care really is about preserving the person you are in order to be able to slug it out and get in there and do it one more time, right? That's what we're trying to generate for you with Learn to Love Your Story. All the online courses, all the coaching packages, this freebie for you that's in the notes that you can click on to get a one-on-one session with me. All of that is geared at helping you have the skills to build that, not just help hand to you on a silver platter. Here's your next purpose. Go and be with the universe and get that done for yourself. What I want you to know is, how do you figure that out? When you feel backed in the corner, when the Band-Aid is ripped off, when the kids move out, when the job is lost, or you're laid off, or you're downsized, when you're going through that divorce, when somebody knocks on the door and rips open the fabric of the universe and shows you, hey, that illusion you created, yeah, that's not actually a thing. And you're going to have to reinvent this wheel. These are the skills that really help you to accomplish that. These are the skills that are going to help you be able to grow and be a better version of yourself, learn to love your story at any place that you are, pivot through any issue that happens to you at any point in your life. This stuff is great, you guys. And again, just to reiterate, my whole point in Learn to Love Your Story, in the Dr. Natalie podcast, all of this is to get this information out there to people before the bottom drops out. I don't want you to feel like you're, me getting that knock on the door. I don't want the bottom to fall out underneath your life for you to finally go in and talk to somebody. I want you to start this personal growth, this personal development journey right now. Do it for yourself. Keep listening to the podcast. Go to learntoloveyourstory.com and see what other resources that I have available. Some of them are free. Go to learntoloveyourstory.com and see what other resources that I have available, many of which are free in my blogs and my videos. And yeah, of course, I have online courses and other things. If that's something that you're interested in, I can certainly talk to you about that more. But honestly, I just want you to get the stuff. That's what I want. I want to not have us hit midlife crisis. So we want to go into that midlife mastery. We want to master our midlife. We want to thrive instead of feeling like we're surviving. And these are the skill sets, the things that I've talked about through this entire series. And I will have that freebie open for a period of time now. So please click on the link in the notes, sign up for your 30-minute freebie with me. Let's look at where your strengths and weaknesses are in this midlife crazy. And what can I suggest that you do to make sure that you're on this path, that you have the skills underneath you to be able to pivot through and to really design a life that you want to be living. What if I told you that 17.3 million American adults have depression. 17.3 million adults. What does that make you think about? I'll tell you what, when I see statistics like that, it always blows my mind because we're all walking around here like nothing's happening. Like, oh, yeah, I got my stuff together. Yeah, it's stressful. I sometimes think that we talk about stress like it's some sort of commodity that we have. Like, oh, you think you're stressed? Well, I have way more stacked up at my house over here. It's ridiculous. It's become so commonplace that we just don't even really notice it's there. But the World Health Organization tells us that depression is literally the leading cause of disability in this world. Depression, not some sort of physical illness, depression. If you want to learn a little bit more today about how I think we should be addressing this in America for yourselves, and certainly as midlife women, keep listening.
You're listening to Straight from the Psychologist's Mouth, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice-divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I've taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started.
Welcome back. Well, wow, we had a great run at talking about midlife mastery. And just so you know, if you haven't already, please go to the notes and click on the link because I'm still offering a free one-on-one session where we're going to go through an assessment, kind of look at where you're at with things, and I can give you an individualized plan and an individualized assessment that really talks to, where are your strengths, where are your vulnerabilities, and what are some of the recommendations that I would give you instead of just the general recommendations I give here on the podcast. So what did you think of those statistics though? Woof, grim, right? 17.3 million adults in America have depression. I kind of want to crawl into my covers. I'm not going to lie. But even though those are harrowing statistics, they're accurate, right? And honestly, they're going to be under accurate, if I'm being honest, because the way that we collect data like this is through report and sometimes through, gleaning information that's more public about diagnoses of people getting healthcare, that kind of thing. But wherever we're getting this information, somebody had to say, yeah, I feel depressed. Or, yeah, I have these symptoms. And then a healthcare provider said, that's depression, check. So if you're not reporting it, which I'm telling you, there are more people out there than you know that are walking around dealing with a ton of depression and not talking about it. Not to mention that a lot of us will call it things like stress or anxiety. Now, anxiety disorders are very specific. And when you're talking to a clinician like myself, we have our idea of what anxiety is. But pop culture kind of throws around depression, anxiety, and stress all like, there's a lot of overlap in the definitions or assumptions that they're using when you use that language. And so when you talk to somebody that's never seen a therapist, never talked to their doctor about feeling sad or down or upset or irritable and taken some medication for it, doesn't have any idea of what these checklists of symptoms are that we're looking at, you might say things like, I'm just feeling down, or I'm just feeling depressed, or I'm feeling stressed, when the stress is actually depression. And sometimes it's even thinking or saying that you have anxiety and the anxiety is actually depression. Depression is quite common. And certainly it's also quite common to have both depression and anxiety, or a depression that looks more anxious, or an anxiety that creates depression kind of on the side. So these are things as a clinician, I just know to be true, but you don't know that, right? You're just walking around there. And so let's just, first of all, say to ourselves, like, this is a really significant issue. If of those major depressive episodes, 63.8% of adults and 70% of adolescents have severe impairment in the United States, that's a big deal, right? Of those 17.3 million adults, almost 64% have severe impairment, which means things like they're missing work and their relationships are being impacted, and they're, like kids or caretaking, or they're, if you're in midlife, if you're caretaking older adults and younger adults, like all that's being impacted. Workplaces being impacted because you can't get there, which means economy is being impacted. This is an epidemic, not to mention that one of the most harrowing statistics always for me is that adult women are twice as likely as men to have depression, right? That's significant. And in midlife, there is a bigger surge. There's kind of this midlife muck. So when I'm talking to you about this, and my target audience is you, it's a midlife woman who is just struggling to get up in the morning and put cereal in her face. I'm trying to help you understand and normalize that some of your experience is an experience that a lot of us are having. Now, the bigger systemic question is, why are we all having this experience, and what in the what? We need to figure out a way to get ourselves out of this predicament, right? For sure. I'm with you 100%. So this brings to mind the idea of taking care of ourselves, right? Like, what is it we need to do to take care of ourselves, or to prevent depression, or to better manage depression if we already have it, or stress or anxiety, or whatever word you want to slip in there and tell me that your problem feelings are called. I don't care. You can call them Fred, you can call them Wilma, you can call them whatever you want, but they are there. I know they are. And so what are these things that we should be doing to care for ourselves, or to care for that, or take care of that, right? It's a big question because there are a lot of ways to go at it. Today in this month, what I'm going to be focusing in on is this idea of self-care. Now, self-care gets slung around a lot too. And so I need to define for you what I mean by self-care. But let's just look for a minute at what a lot of people think of self-care. I almost always, when I ask a question about self-care, when I'm interviewing someone, or, my new assessment where you get your one-to-one coaching, I actually ask several questions along this line. But what I notice when people kind of report things to me is that we've gotten the idea that self-care is physical body care. Like, the thing that I hear most are, well, I eat a good diet, and I try to exercise 3 to 4 times a week, thinking that that defines what self-care, like if I do those things, then I'm doing self-care. And so we'll dig a little bit more into, what do you think it is, and what do you think it isn't? Like, if you have self-care in your life, if you're doing it like you're killing it, you're doing it better than anybody else, what does that look like? And if you're struggling with it, what does that look like, do you think? Because sometimes that helps me get a better idea of what your picture of self-care is. And in general, as we kind of distill that down, most people have an idea of self-care being some version of the things I do for myself to get myself back to normal, the things that catch me back up, or the things that I do to escape from my stress, essentially, because it's just gotten too overwhelming, so that I can reset. So some people would say, like, a self-care thing would be, I might take a weekend and go out of town, or visit somebody I care about, and try to reset before the work week on Monday. Like, if I have a stressful week, that might be one of the ways I go about it. So you can see this kind of an idea of self-care is still assuming that you're at optimum functioning level and that all you need is a refresh, right? That isn't actually how this works. It's not how the human is designed, right? Like part of what you're seeing when you see depression, some of the most common symptoms of depression people don't know, things like you're irritable. People think it's really just being down and sad all the time, but people with depression have a high amount of irritability, which really means they don't tolerate anything going out of whack very well. Sound familiar? Right. So if you have very little tolerance past, like if everything just stays controlled and as I need it to be, I'll be okay. But if anything goes awry, I won't be okay. You are well below where you should be for baseline, right? And so if what's happening is that week stretches you way, way too thin and you need to recharge on the weekends, I still think that when you get back on Monday, you are not where you need to be. So self-care in lots of ways is what are we doing that fills us up and gives us enough bandwidth, enough space between losing it and being able to handle stress. That's what we're gearing at. What we need is for you to function in such a way that if things come your way, you can handle them all the time. Not, I need to get some self care to make up for the fact that I can't handle them, or I need to do some self care to get myself back because I hit that line and I've lost it. This is not efficient self care. Self care really is about doing the kinds of things for ourselves in all the different realms, not just physical, but emotional, your mind, challenging yourself cognitively, your work life having self-care, your private life having self-care, your social life having self-care built into it. I know you're already scratching your head. Hopefully you're not driving and you still have two hands on the wheel. But if you are driving, keep two hands on the wheel. You're hearing this and you're thinking to me, what does she mean? Like, yes, but in all realms of our life, there needs to be an element of self-care built in. And the purpose of it is to keep us in our lives. What will happen naturally when we have been in toxic stress or chronic stress for too long is that we want to escape. We want to avoid things. We don't want to feel that way. We want to have the glass of wine on Friday, and we might start drinking them on Wednesday, right? This is the kind of stuff that starts to creep in. We watched Netflix all weekend and didn't get anything done for the house, right? It's the kinds of things that we start to do to escape our lives or escape the stress, at least, is what we're considering it to be. We're avoiding that stress, we're escaping that stress. I want you to think of self-care as the thing that bolsters us up so that we can take on any kind of stress, well, nearly any kind of stress, so that even if you are having stressful things happen, it isn't like they throw you over the edge. It isn't like standing in line and somebody in front of you taking their sweet time starts to make you just surge and boil, right? We don't want that for you. What we want is for you to not just be good, but to be so good, so well put together in all facets of your life that, hey, if the boss gives you an extra thing to do, yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it's going to eat into some of your time, but you've got it in you to do it. Your partner at home slacking on, taking care of some of the household duties, and you kind of are walking into the bathroom and it's not clean or the dishes aren't done. It won't throw you over the edge, right? This is the point of what self-care does. And this is the essentiality of self-care. It is not a luxury, but it definitely gets marketed that way, right? So we live in this capitalistic society where, God bless us, we're all trying to make a buck. And I don't want anybody to hear that I don't want them to do that. But the marketing towards self-care as a luxury it has an implied message that's really dangerous for us, especially when you talk about 17.3 million adults having depression in America. Self-care that is take the weekend and go on a trip, go indulge yourself and have a dinner here, buy this, item and it will be relaxing for you at home. And that's your self-care. Or, even the marketing towards your physical body care. And, you need this and you need this kind of gym membership. And maybe you should have this and, yoga and this and this and this to go with that. I love these items. It's not like any one of those things isn't valuable, but I can't name them as effective self-care for everybody. They might be part of someone's self-care regimen, yes, and work for them, but self-care is an individual thing. Everybody's self-care is individualized. And here's something even more mind-bendy. It's not just that it's individualized, but as we age and develop and change, it has to change with us. Because what was self-care for me when I was 20 and when I was 30 and when I was 40 is not where I'm at today. It's just not. I need different kinds of things, and my energy levels and stamina for things are different. Some of which is better. Like my stamina for some things are much better than they were when I was younger. But my focus, when I was 20 was on lots of different things. And so I didn't have stamina for any one. I just wanted to do all the things all the time. And now I want to find the things I love and zone in on them. So let's just talk about self-care as this thing that we do for ourselves, this attention to ourselves to be feeding the vessel that is going to go out into the world and do all of what we're desiring to do, all of the things that are in alignment with our purpose, with who we are as people. So it's all that we do to support that. It isn't stuff that we just add on here and there as a luxury or an addition or let's go take a break for a while and come back at it. It's not that. It's stuff that has to be here day in and day out. It's a necessity. I have a blog. I'll try to put in the notes a link to this blog, but I have a blog that talks about rewarding yourself daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly. And it's based in this kind of self-care premise. But what I'm getting at is that there are different levels to our self-care too. There are things that we have to do on the daily. If we're not doing them on the daily, we don't function, right? But there are some versions of our self-care that don't have to happen that frequently. And there are some parts of our self-care regimen that don't have anything to do with things that we're doing necessarily or taking time with. It's more about the boundaries that we're setting with our time, or the boundaries we're setting with other people and their accessibility to us, or how many things we decide to take on. Self-care comes in all sizes and packages. The rest of the month, I'm going to get into more of those details. But today, I really just wanted to focus in on this concept that self-care is something that you're doing to keep yourself at your optimum level. And it isn't something that is an addition or an add-on or a luxury, but rather something that I want you to start to really mess around with and start thinking from the perspective of what are the things that I absolutely need that are non-negotiables that keep me at my optimum level, right? So hey, for starters, some of us might have to have a real hard talk with ourselves and really look at what is my optimum level? Because if I am just getting by during the week and refreshing on my weekends, this is not a sustainable model, right? This is not a great business model for sure, but it's not a sustainable model of living at all. So I would say you need to have a hard conversation with yourself about what is realistic. What would optimum look like? So you can start with asking yourself questions and doing some reflection and even, journaling. Remember, I am a therapist, so I'm going to throw these things out to you every once in a while. But you can start with some reflection around, who are the people in my life that I think are operating that optimum level? And what is it that it looks like that they are like and that they do when they're at that optimum level. So that's one way to come at it. Another way to come at it is just to say, ideally, how would I know that I had arrived at optimum level for myself? Like, what would I feel like? What would I look like? What would I be spending my time doing? Who would I be spending that time with? Would things look any different, right? So if you're reflecting and you answer those questions I just asked, what you may find is that some of the things that you're doing on the regular now are things that at an optimum level, you would probably set a boundary and say, that's not for me. So that extra job that you're volunteering, at the PTA, you're not going to do, or that extra thing that you're volunteering at some other, community organization, you're not going to be doing. But you definitely are still going to be saying yes to all of the invitations that your friends have for fun things to do on the weekends, because that lights you up. So that's what I would think of. It's kind of Marie Kondoing, having a hard conversation with yourself and Marie Kondoing your life, where you're looking at, like, does this spark joy? Does this bring me what I need light me up? Or is this just a thing that's like neutral? Or even worse, is this just a thing that I'm just tolerating or not even really tolerating well? So after you've done an assessment like that, then you can look at your life and kind of categorically start to see where are the areas that I'm most in deficit in my self-care. Could be spiritual, could be mental, maybe I need to challenge my brain a little bit. I haven't done anything new in my job for years and years and years. I just punch in and punch out and do the thing. And I haven't expanded any of my awareness. I've kind of dropped out of all of that. Well, let's figure out a way to do that. Let's figure out a way that works for you, that lights you up, that builds your learning capacity, that makes you use that brain of yours. It's a really good protective factor against any kind of dementia or Alzheimer's later in life, is that we're, stretching our brain to continue to have to learn new things. Some crazy neurologists will talk about, like, just switch which hand you brush your teeth with. It doesn't have to be a big deal, right? So, like, switch the hand that you brush your teeth with. You're having to learn a new set of motions, right? Your body memory is that this dominant hand does it. So if you start brushing your teeth with a separate hand, you're going to notice it right away. It's going to feel uncomfortable, weird, just not right. But it's creating new neurology in your brain, because your brain is going to have to compensate and say, well, how do we do this? And how do we make that more rhythmic and automatic? Because we had been doing it this other way for a long time. So, expanding our brains doesn't mean you necessarily need to all of a sudden become somebody who looks at the Harvard Business Review. I just mean you need to challenge yourself in some way to keep building and keep learning and keep those learning skills up. So you do this kind of audit, you're looking at what sparks joy, you're Marie Kondoing your life, and you'll come down to kind of two categories of self-care things. So the first category is, we have only a certain amount of energy, right? We're a finite resource, which is why we need to do this self-care, right? If we're going to stay optimum in our optimum energy level, then we're going to have things that shore that up, that, create some flexible or permeable walls. Because I don't want you to feel like you have to, like, hold up in the tower or something, but you want to wrap around your life just some boundaries around what you're going to let yourself do and not do, who are you going to let in and not in, how much access are they going to have or not have, to make sure that we preserve the energy that is inside us, right? Now, life takes energy. Turns out we can't just shore it all up and we'll be okay. Like, that's not how this works either. So the other category are, what are those things that replenish us? What are the things that fill us back up when we have depleted ourselves? So it's a constant dance between those two, because we have to be very discerning about, I want to burn my energy in the work that I do. It brings me tons of joy. I want to be there. Like I want to burn energy in taking care of my family. That means a lot to me. I want to burn energy in getting up at 5:30 in the morning, and God bless her soul, this is what my neighbor does, and go and exercise every single morning. That's not for everybody, right? But we're doing these discerning things where we decide what we want, right? Where do we want to expend that energy? But we also then have to decide, what are we doing that replenishes, right? So there'll be a certain amount that just keeps you in that optimum level if nothing happens in our life, if everything just keeps copacetic and nothing is happening in our life. All right. So that's your baseline amount of self-care things. There's things that are boundaried and keeping what energy in, that, not letting it leak in ways that you're not seeing it. One of my favorite ways to pick out if you have like a leak, do you say yes to things and have difficulty saying no? Because if you say yes to almost everything and don't like saying no, feel uncomfortable saying no, try to make it work, then more than likely you're leaking a lot of your energy, because that's an easy shore up. That's an easy way to just say, no, I can't take anything else on. It's not part of this optimum level for me. So I'm not going to let that leak out. So we have this optimum level, and if everything keeps going as it goes, we're okay. So now we need another set of things that both boundary up, shore things up, and refill us, that are meant for when we get a certain amount of stress. Okay. So think about your life. When you're doing that audit, you can also look at, is there any pattern to this? Some of us have, like, as a mental health professional, I can tell you there are definitely waves during the year where you'll see more or less people. So say you're a child therapist, for instance, or a school counselor. When do you think you start to see the most kids? Bum, 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 right at, like about a month after they've gotten into school and the teachers have gotten a hold of them and they're seeing how this is going or not going. Kids get referred to their, outside therapists, or kids get referred to those school counselors. And so I would say school counselors would tell you about October, woof, a lot happening. Or if you start in August, about September, woo, lots happening. So it's about a month in. And there are waves like that in different careers. So there may be ways to be that this is predictive, right? And you can be really strategic about, I'm going to need extra this during this time. So if you're to go on that, if you're this person that needs a little extra time because you're a school counselor and it's October, you will probably not schedule, a big family gathering during that month that would take a lot of extra effort on your part to be able to prepare for, right? Or you might not want to remodel your kitchen during this time. That might not be the best idea, because you'd want everything at home to stay in its routine the way you need it to stay. Okay. So you're trying to come to some understanding of, like, what would be these extra things that I could do that would shore things up or fill me back up? So you may have other things on your self-care list that aren't routinely there, but are able to be accessed as you need them. Right. And this is where, when I talk, about those different levels of the daily, the weekly, the monthly, the yearly, these monthly things are usually some of the things that I have people think about for this category, because I want you still to be doing them routinely, because I need them to be the kinds of things that still fill you back up, right? Or still create a boundary for you. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. If you're not practicing it, it may not have the same effect on you. So there are some things that I talk about, like you're doing on the monthly regularly. So hey, I don't know, maybe you give yourself a little bit of a savings account. You'll build a little bit back up in self-care if nothing is happening in your life and everything is staying stable. But for those of us where there's stress, this is an opportunity for us to do extra replenishment, right? So scheduling, say, a 3-day weekend every month of the year, that 12 of your PTO days are dedicated to creating a 3-day weekend for yourself every month of the year. That might be an opportunity for you. not for all of us, but it could be one for you. Or I'm always going to work a half day on Fridays and I work 9-hour days on the other days. And that half day on Fridays is my weekly that really invests. But every once in a while, for the month, I'll take that 4 hours off and I'll also give myself a 3-day weekend. These are the kinds of things that we're building in to be there for us, but they also will tell us where we can amp something up on either side, on needing to create boundaries or on and replenishing things. And you really need, again, the dance. You need to balance between those, because it isn't just enough to say, I have this hard project at work and I'm going at it 24/7 right now, and I'm going to keep doing all that I do all the time. That's not going to work for you, right? So in those, situations, yeah, you're going to have to say no to more things, even things you'd want to do. You might have to say, no, I can't take the kids there. No, I can't, do this family engagement, all because I need the extra time right now for myself to have some restoration in between. You also, though, are burning a lot of midnight oil. So you need other things that are replenishing you. And those things can be pretty simple. They might be as simple as, say, just getting more rest and making sure that you're absolutely rigid about making sure to get your 8 hours. So we have our baseline. Here's me doing optimum. We have some extra things that if any stressors hit us, we know what they are. And then above that, there are the things that we would call on if we were in dire need. Okay. And these have to get practiced too. Because let me tell you, probably the signature thing that women that I work with say to me all the time is I don't ask for help when I need it. I am there always to offer that help for someone else, but I do not ask for that help. And part of why they don't is they've never practiced it. They were never taught it. They didn't see examples of that. Because if you're in this human doer syndrome that we all are in, human givers, we've been acculturated to be doing that and serving all the time. We weren't given opportunities to see what it looked like to ask for the help and to receive the help. And sometimes it even feels yucky to receive the help because we've got all sorts of social conditioning that tells us we shouldn't be doing that. Well, of course you should, because there are just times where your optimum amount of self-care isn't working, the little bit of extra isn't working, and you need to call in some reinforcements. So you also have to be thinking about it that way. And one of the ways that I'll talk about it with my coaching clients is if you think of yourself like at the center of a set of concentric circles, okay? So you're the circle in the middle and you're making these, it looks like a target, circles that go around you. What you're trying to create here is that, when you need help, there are things that can come to your aid from your self-care. And that's just outside of you, right? It's just the circle right outside of you. But when you can't make that work, that even that piece of your life is going to have to reach out and get some help to get you to be most reinforced. So, if part of your self-care regimen is to be social, which a lot of us that have a social self-care need, you're probably seeing your friends on the regular, but if you're not talking to them about the problems that you're having, then you're not going to get that extra bit. And if the problems you're having erupt into a big deal, then you need to lean on those people that you're seeing all the time. But you also have to believe that those people are leaning on the people they need in order to support you with that. And that is a rank ordering of self-care socially. Like I depend on the kind of people that I know are the kind of people that depend on their people if ever I ask. It's not over ask, but if ever I have to ask a great deal of them, and I trust that they will they're boundaried and they're going to tell me, nope, can't do that. I'm so sorry, Natalie. So that's the kind of thing I want you to be thinking about throughout this month as you listen to all the different ideas that I'm going to be giving us on what it is that self-care really is and what it is that it isn't, and giving you new ideas for ways to expand so that you can create a better optimum level of regular self-care that you're giving to yourself all the time. And then anytime there's some added stress in your life, you've got a group of things that you're doing when you need that. And then anytime that the really bad stuff happens, which does happen occasionally, that you have a plan for that as well to add on with your self-care. And it's always going to be a combination of boundarying or, firming up the boundaries of what keeps your energy in and things that you're doing that replenish you, because you can't have one without the other. They just don't work without being in unison with one another. Okay. Well, I had a great time talking about this. I really am excited to share some of the things that I share with my coaching group. So what you're going to get in the next few weeks are some of the very things that I share with my coaching groups on self-care. Yeah. So I'm excited to be able to share with you. These are things that I do for coaching. I mean, this is what you would get with me. And in particular, we will talk about boundaries. So that will be one of the subject matters that we get into. But we're also going to talk about things that you maybe haven't thought of, like energetic healing modalities that might be also useful in bolstering up your energy or in creating boundaries with your energy. So it's going to be fun to kind of sift through some of this stuff. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments, or any of you that follow on social media, add to this, because I will be asking questions throughout this month on my social media feeds about self-care and what people are doing, what they're, what works the best for them. And when they're in that hot spot, how do they get out of it? Because I'm curious to hear, and I'm always adding to this part of the curriculum that I do for my courses online or my coaching packages. So, all right, everybody, you have a great rest of your week. And as we start to share with one another, we'll be able to make better optimum, better extra, and better, when we need to really call in the reserves, we'll make better plans for our self-care plan, better regimens for our self-care regimens. And we'll be better about looking at that balance between boundarying it up and making sure that we have things that refill us. And we are just doing this to help everybody here design the life that they want to be living in and learn to love their story.